Anybody want to feel old yet? Well, a certain iconic magical girl anime is turning 20 at the end of this month, which came out around the same time I finished high school and started going into college. Yeah, I may not look it, but I definitely feel it. Well, as I was saying, a certain iconic magical girl anime is turning 20 at the end of this month. So to celebrate this momentous occasion, let's take a look at the original anime that turned out to be a spiritual successor to Sailor Moon, the original Pretty Cure series. Pretty Cure, or Futari wa Pretty Cure, is an original anime created by Toei Animation that began airing on TV Asahi on February 1st, 2004 for 96 episodes across 2 seasons as the first installment in the Pretty Cure meta-series. The story centers around a duo of middle school students, Nagisa Mizumi and Honoka Yukishiro, who gain the power to transform into the titular Protectors of Light, known as Pretty Cure. The Cures are then tasked with collecting the legendary Prism Stones to restore the Garden of Light, while fighting against the forces of the Dark Zone that caused its destruction, and have turned their eyes on their own world, Earth, also known as the Garden of Rainbows. And we are in luck. There actually is an English dub to the original Pretty Cure series. The catch is that it was only released in Canada, airing on YTV, which means in order to get a hold of the English version of this show for review purposes, I had to resort to legally questionable means to do so. Well, anyway, let's dive right in and see what the English localizers did with it. The story begins with a girl named Nagisa competing in a lacrosse tournament, as we also meet another girl named Honoka demonstrating in her science class. Let this be a warning to you kids, this is what happens when you combine the nitric acid with the glycerol. Little do they know it, but the daily lives of these two girls are going to collide with each other in the most peculiar of ways. So after the main credits, we come across the first problem with the localization. All of the characters' names have been changed into English ones.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
Which makes me wonder, what else did the English localizers of this anime do with it? However, after saving Nagisa from publicly answering a poorly written math equation in class, Nagisa thanks Honoka for sparing her the embarrassment. When Nagisa comes home, she collapses on her bed and wishes she were more like Honoka, popular with the boys and smart as hell. However, her wish does come true in the form of a shooting star, which turns out to be a tiny UFO in the form of a Motorola flip phone.
Hello, Moto.
It also comes with a cute little plushie inside too that actually responds to her. Yeah, at least it can't be dumber than a talking cat.
And who might you be?
On barbiturates for one. Good night, everybody. The creature in her phone, named Meppel, takes her on a wild goose chase to find his partner Mipple, who is in the possession of Honoka. But before they can meet, they are stopped by Jareth from the movie Labyrinth? And let's be honest, since everything is cooler when you have David Bowie in it.
I ask for so little. Just let me rule you, and you can have everything that you want.
Yeah, we don't really care. When is it gonna get to the part when you're gonna start singing? With the help of their cell phone buddies, the girls transform into Pretty Cures, Cure Black and Cure White.
Emissary of Light, I'm Cure Black. Emissary of Light, I'm Cure White. Together we are Pretty Cure!
There it is!
So if you are even at least familiar with magical girl anime, after a brief fight with Jareth, rather than continue the fight on his own, he summons a dark cloud that takes over a nearby roller coaster train, and it transforms into a monster known as a Zakena. Compare that to the first enemy that Sailor Moon encounters, though. Yeah, this monster may be cool looking, but it isn't even remotely as scary. The two girls join hands and combine their powers into their primary mode of attack, the marble screw, and easily vanquish the monster as Jareth looks on in disgust. So let's begin a little history lesson. Where did this anime come from? The development of the Pretty Cure series actually begins in 1997. During that year, the original Sailor Moon anime finished its run on TV Asahi. It was also at this point Naoko Takeuchi decided to put away the pen on Sailor Moon. When your main character goes from crybaby magical girl to a literal god of the galaxy, how do you move forward from there? But then again, that didn't stop Dragon Ball. There were also rumors that Takeuchi was dissatisfied with how the Sailor Moon Sailor Stars anime was handled, and she decided to end the story. And with Sailor Moon Sailor Stars deviating the most from the source material compared to past seasons of the show, I don't blame her. Toei Animation did not want to repeat the same mistakes of Dragon Ball GT by continuing the anime without the involvement of the manga's author. So they moved forward to make a magical girl anime on par with Sailor Moon that wasn't bound to when the author of the source material calls it quits. So they began work on an original anime project that Toei Animation had complete creative control of. 2 shows were commissioned since Sailor Moon concluded. The first to come out was a magical girl show called Magical Do-Re-Mi, which ran for 3 seasons between 1999 and 2003. The other was Futari wa Pretty Cure, which began airing in 2004. Whatever the case, it's got some mighty big shoes to fill. Today, Pretty Cure is a franchise, much like Sailor Moon before it, and is often regarded as a spiritual successor to Sailor Moon. So much, in fact, that this series is often compared to being a sister show to the long-running Super Sentai, which we all know over here as Power Rangers. As for the original show, it's very basic for magical girl anime, especially when compared to future installments in the franchise. It's more along the lines of a new franchise that hasn't yet figured out its standard formula. It's basically a couple of magical girls recover 7 magic artifacts, prism stones, Dragon Balls, Chaos Emeralds, the works, beat the bad guy, and save the world. The episodes are mostly formulaic, intertwining problems that the girls face in their day-to-day lives with their Pretty Cure fights in a Monster of the Week style bonanza. Although there were definitely highlight episodes in relation to the plot, the overall presentation felt very simplistic and straightforward, combined with the repetitive feel this anime had at times.
There kind of is a reason for this. It's near instant runaway success.
The show was clearly set up to be a standard 23 to 24 episode anime. The problem was that the show became such a huge hit so quickly, the show was pushed to extend out a further 25 episodes. This became a problem since they'd clearly already set everything up for the finale, yet they had to backtrack everything in order to extend the conflict and thus the show. No surprise to tell you that the second half of this anime loses a lot of momentum, as it is basically filler with a lot of repetition and retreading from themes and character developments in past episodes. After this point, there are no major plot twists or story advancements to keep you interested after the first climax. At this point, I wish their attacks had been upgraded by now, or they would get new ones to take on stronger foes rather than fight the same antagonists all over again. Yeah, it's the same main antagonist twice. Compare this to Sailor Moon, by which at the second arc of the story, Queen Beryl is soundly defeated, and we are currently taking on a much more powerful adversary.
Then again, Sailor Moon even had to fight the same villain twice, as they were recycled from Sailor Moon Super S into the first few episodes of Sailor Moon Sailor Stars. The only problem with that is that those episodes were pure filler.
Still, for what it is, it's harmless. It's perfectly suitable for young girls and has a charm to it, even though I am clearly not part of its target demographic. This series is also good at building up major plot points and giving them a strong payoff. The issue at hand here is that when you compare this to its predecessor, what Futariwa Pretty Cure does good, Sailor Moon does much, much better.
And not to mention, I am seriously glad that this show was not picked up by 4Kids Entertainment. Seriously, this show has all the hallmarks of an anime that would be picked up by them.
So with that, I give story a 3 out of 5. The opening theme for Pretty Cure is Danzen Futariwa Pretty Cure by Mayumi Gojo, and the ending theme is Getchu Rabu Rabu, also by Mayumi Gojo. The soundtrack itself was composed by Sato Naoki. Of special note, the English dub was produced by the Ocean Group, the same group that developed the original English dub for Dragon Ball Z.
Before you celebrate, be reminded that this show was only aired in English in Canada on YTV. There is no other way you can get a hold of this show.
Secondly, this was given the standard English localization treatment. Characters' names are changed, dialogue is placed where there was none before, dialogue is changed to include modern English slang, the works. Told you this had all the hallmarks of a 4Kids Entertainment show. Hell, at least there are no political messages or personal biases involved, as well as complaints about the patriarchy. Either way, do not watch the dub. I lost interest in it pretty quickly and switched over to Japanese with English subtitles for the rest of it.
But I digress.
The soundtrack for the original show is also pretty good. The opening theme in particular is as bubbly as hell and so easy to catch yourself at least humming a few bars to this thing. Hona Yoko and Yukana both deliver strong performances as Nagisa and Honoka. Another highlight is that Ono Kenichi makes for a pretty intimidating villain. My only wish is that the character had the ambition to back it up. But with that, I will give soundtrack a 4 out of 5. With the show being created by Toei Animation, it's no surprise this show was animated by Toei Animation. The show has a bright and colorful watercolor-like feel to the characters and backgrounds. It also has really good physical action sequences with a balance toward both magic and physical combat. Unlike other magical girl anime, the fighting in Pretty Cure is much more shonen-like. The fights are well animated and fun to watch, with lots of punches, kicks, and whatever movements the girls can think of to gain the upper hand, and the villains can hit back just as hard. It's respective to another Toei Animation show, just not nearly as intense. The monsters are nice and creative, and I do like how they transform into little black stars who start apologizing when they lose. The only exception is the second set of villains who just look boring. Despite this, there are a couple of major drawbacks. First is the use of the now long outdated 4:3 aspect ratio. I get that this was made in 2004, as 16:9 displays back then were not as common as they are right now. But when you consider that even early episodes of One Piece were animated in 16:9, why not this? Secondly, as with a lot of magical girl anime at the time, the show suffers a lot from reused animation sequences. Not only in terms of transformations, but especially in attacks. Nagisa and Honoka only have 2 major attacks they use throughout the series, and yes, it is the same sequence shown over and over and over again. Not to say that Sailor Moon has the same issues with reused animation at key points, but Sailor Moon and the Sailor Guardians actually developed new skills as they became stronger. Quality-wise, the animation is slightly better than Sailor Moon's, given this used digital cells, as opposed to Sailor Moon, which was completely cell animated. So I will give animation a 3 out of 5. For an anime based on friendship, overcoming hardships, and fighting the darkness in our hearts, I love the character dynamics between the 2 heroines. You have Nagisa, the boisterous, tomboyish one who loves sports. On the other hand, you have Honoka, the strong, silent type who is also the school's resident genius. The most compatible match? Hardly. But one thing I loved about this show compared to other magical girl shows is that they are entirely dependent on each other. Compared to Sailor Moon, most of the Sailor Guardians are strong and capable enough to carry a fight on their own, but are nonetheless much stronger when brought together. Here, one can't even transform without the other being present, making them absolutely defenseless on their own. So you can understand that Nagisa and Honoka are really strong leads, and they have excellent character dynamics, that you can feel their bond grow throughout the show.
The thing is, I cannot say the same thing about the anime's villains.
These are some of the most one-dimensional, one-note characters that have not much personality. The villain's lack of common sense comes dangerously close to stupidity that I can't believe they hold much of a threat. Most of the villains also lack personality or interesting motivations. Let's take the Dark King, whose actions are of self-preservation, I guess, as his own powers are slowly killing him. Seriously, don't ask how that makes any sense, but the details of his ambitions are so vague, you don't really get an idea of what his motivations are until the anime is almost over.
Oh, and the first major villain that the Cure's come across? He's out in 5 episodes. Oh yeah, Jadeite would point and laugh. Jadeite!
To be fair, there is a reason for their actions that makes sense, but they still aren't developed or interesting in the least. Why not something like, oh, the Dark King has an infatuation with the Queen of Light that isn't reciprocated, so he goes on conquering other worlds to impress her. He sets his sight on Earth and begins collecting the prism stones that triggers the main conflict. Yeah, it's basic, but it makes a lot more sense than the motivation these villains already have. In contrast, we have Frieza, Queen Beryl, Myotismon, and a plethora of memorable villains from One Piece. Not to say the franchise does not have interesting villains. It does, but not in this first outing. The only other thing I can say about the villains is that the weekly monster designs are pretty cool. So, with an interesting and dynamic pair of heroines going up against bland and one-note villains, I have to say this constitutes a solid 3 out of 5 for characters. In the end, I must say that for such an influential anime series, this had a very rocky start. There are good moments, but even at its best, the series doesn't quite catch up with other classics of the magical girl genre. It was a little slow at times, it had lackluster villains, and I thought the story dragged in the second half of the show. While it certainly has its flaws, it created the starting point for an amazing franchise that keeps providing hours and hours of fun. Let's not forget that this show laid the groundwork for much better stories in the franchise later on. I may not be that much of a fan of this franchise, but I know a milestone when I see one, so I wanted to make this review as a way of saying, congratulations on hitting the Big 20, Pretty Cure, you earned it. With that, I give the original Pretty Cure 3 points for interest and an overall rating of 6 out of 10.
Well, we've got yet another major milestone coming up. This year is the Year of the Dragon according to the Chinese calendar. So, I think you all know what that means. It's about time, everybody. Welcome to the Year of the Dragon Ball. Until next time, this is the American Anime Otaku signing out.